Between 1885 and 1908, the population of the Congo Basin dropped by an estimated 10 million people. Not through war between rival nations, not through famine or plague, though both were used as weapons, through the deliberate machinery of one man's private greed, operating behind the banner of civilization. The world knew. Missionaries wrote home about it. Journalists published photographs. And for nearly 20 years, the world looked away. This is what they buried. The Congo Free State. It sounds like a contradiction, and it was. From 1885 to 1908, a territory the size of Western Europe was the legal personal property of one man, King Leopold II of Belgium. Not a colony of the Belgian government, not a protectorate under international supervision. His, acquired through diplomacy so skilled it bordered on fraud, administered through terror so systematic it bordered on genocide. Leopold never visited. He never needed to. He had built a machine that ran itself, powered by rubber, by fear, and by the absolute silence of a world that chose profit over conscience. Tonight, we examine what that silence cost. Leopold II did not seize the Congo with armies. He bought it with words. In the early 1880s, European powers were engaged in a frantic scramble to carve up the African continent. Borders were being drawn by men who had never stood on African soil, in conference rooms in Berlin, over wine and treaties, in the candlelit offices of foreign ministers. Leopold understood something that the other powers did not. The fastest way to acquire territory was not force, but moral authority. So he invented some. In 1876, Leopold convened the International Geographic Conference in Brussels, inviting philanthropists, abolitionists, and geographers from across Europe. He presented himself as a man consumed by a single humanitarian purpose: to open Central Africa to civilization, to suppress the Arab slave trade, and to bring Christianity and commerce to the people of the Congo Basin. The organization he created, the International Association of the Congo, was structured to look exactly like a charitable society. It had no shareholders. It had no obvious profit motive. It was, in every visible dimension, an act of enlightened generosity. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, Leopold's representatives made one promise above all others: free trade for all nations in the Congo Basin. No monopolies, no exploitation. In exchange, they asked only for the recognition of Leopold's sovereignty over the region, a private humanitarian administrator for a territory no single European nation could agree to claim. 13 nations signed. The United States was the first. They gave a private individual absolute control over 2.3 million square kilometers and 20 million people. They called it a gift to civilization. They were wrong about everything except the gift, and about who was receiving it. By the early 1890s, the bicycle and the automobile had made rubber one of the most valuable commodities on Earth, and the Congo Basin held wild rubber vines in extraordinary abundance, climbing through the forest canopy for miles, untapped and waiting. Leopold had found his fortune. What he built to extract it was not a labor system. It was a hostage economy. Every village in the Congo Free State was assigned a monthly rubber quota, a fixed weight of raw rubber that every able-bodied man was required to deliver to the state's collection posts. The quota was not negotiable. It was not paid for. It was simply a tax, levied in labor, enforced at gunpoint by the force public, the colony's private military, composed of African soldiers commanded by Belgian and European officers. If a village failed to meet its quota, the consequences were immediate and engineered to be visible. Women and children were taken hostage and held in stockades until the rubber was delivered. Entire villages were burned. People who attempted to flee into the forest were hunted. But the detail that has come to define this era in the historical record, the detail that even today is difficult to process as an administrative policy, is what happened with bullets. The force public was required to account for every cartridge issued, so that soldiers could not waste ammunition or sell it. The proof required for each spent cartridge was the severed right hand of the person it had been used on. Soldiers who missed their shots, or who used bullets for other purposes, began cutting hands from living people, from children, from the elderly, to meet their quotas. Baskets of hands were delivered to colonial administrators alongside barrels of rubber. Both were recorded in ledgers. Both were checked against targets. The severed hand became, in the bureaucratic language of the Congo Free State, a unit of accountability. This was not the violence of chaos. It was the violence of administration. It had paperwork. The Congo Free State's crimes did not remain hidden for lack of witnesses. By the late 1890s, evidence was accumulating from multiple directions simultaneously, from missionaries writing to their churches in England and America, from shipping clerks filing reports they were not supposed to be filing, and from at least one man who understood that the numbers themselves were a confession. E.D. Morel was a young British shipping clerk employed by a Liverpool firm trading with the Congo. In the early 1900s, he began noticing something that no one else in his position had chosen to notice. Ships arriving from the Congo were loaded with rubber and ivory. Ships departing for the Congo carried almost no trade goods in return, only weapons and ammunition. In any legitimate trade relationship, goods flow in both directions. Morel understood that the only economic model that explained this pattern was not trade. It was forced labor. He was 27 years old when he concluded that the Congo Free State was operating a system of institutionalized slavery on a continental scale. He immediately began to write about it. In 1904, a British Baptist missionary named Alice Seeley Harris returned from the Congo with something unprecedented: photographs. Not descriptions, not testimonies. Photographs. One image in particular, a father named Salah sitting before the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter, killed by forced public soldiers when his village failed to meet its rubber quota, circulated through Britain and America in church halls, in Reformed Society meetings, in newspapers. People who had heard about atrocities without believing them now had no mechanism for disbelief. The Congo Reform Association, co-founded by Morel, became an international movement with chapters across Europe and the United States. For the first time in history, a human rights campaign was driven by documentary photography. Leopold's response, when international pressure finally became impossible to ignore, was not reform. It was erasure. In 1908, facing imminent transfer of the Congo to the Belgian government, Leopold ordered the burning of the Congo Free State Central Archives. Decades of administrative records, the ledgers, the correspondence, the quota sheets, the accountability reports, were fed into furnaces in Brussels. Leopold was reported to have said, afterward, "I will give them my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there." The fire consumed an unknown quantity of evidence. Historians who have spent careers reconstructing the scope of the atrocities work, always, with what survived, which is to say, with fragments. In 1908, the Belgian Parliament formally annexed the Congo Free State, renaming it the Belgian Congo. The international community received this as a reform, an end to Leopold's personal rule, a return of the territory to institutional oversight. What it actually represented was a transfer of ownership without a transfer of accountability. The rubber quotas were eventually reduced. The severed hand policy was officially abandoned, but the structural logic of the system, Congolese labor extracted for Belgian benefit, enforced by a militarized administration with no meaningful accountability to the people it governed, did not change. It adapted. The Belgian colonial system that followed Leopold was, by the standards of its era, considered relatively moderate. This tells you something important about the standards of that era. Forced labor continued under different legal frameworks. Taxation systems compelled Congolese men to work for Belgian mining and agricultural interests to pay debts they had no means to repay otherwise. The population continued to decline. Infrastructure built during this period, roads, railways, mines, was built overwhelmingly by Congolese bodies for Belgian profit, with minimal reinvestment in Congolese welfare, education, or political development. When the Belgian government finally agreed, in 1960, to grant the Congo its independence, it did so with almost no preparation for what self-governance would require. The Congo had, at independence, fewer than 30 university graduates among a population of approximately 15 million people. Patrice Lumumba, the Congo's first democratically elected prime minister, lasted 77 days in office before being deposed in a coup supported by Belgium and the United States government, both of whom feared his political orientation. He was executed on January 17, 1961. Belgian police officers were present. A Belgian officer supervised the burial, and when the grave was deemed too shallow, the body was disinterred and dissolved in sulfuric acid to prevent it from becoming a site of mourning. In 2002, the Belgian government formally acknowledged its moral responsibility in Lumumba's assassination. They did not acknowledge colonial crimes. They did not offer reparations. They did not return the 75 kilograms of artifacts and cultural objects currently held in Belgian museums. They offered an acknowledgement, and then they moved on. The Democratic Republic of Congo today remains one of the most resource-rich and economically devastated nations on Earth. Its borders are the borders Leopold drew, not around a people, but around a supply chain. The coltan in your phone may have passed through supply chains rooted in provinces that were rubber territories in 1900. The silence that covered Leopold's crimes was not an accident of history. It was a policy, maintained across generations by governments, corporations, and academic institutions with reasons to prefer the silence. Morel broke it. Harris photographed through it. The 10 million people it was designed to protect were never given the chance. What you do with the knowledge, that is the only part of this story that hasn't been written yet.